Alright guys, here's the progress so far. I finally have these heads torqued down to 120 foot-pounds with the ARP head studs. You can see them poking through right in here. Wasn't very easy getting to 120 foot-pounds. I literally had to stand on that bar right there, put a little bit of my foot pressure right here to get leverage to get 120 foot-pounds on the back ones over here, and on that side that's the worst side right there. Actually, I had to get that bottom one from standing over there, and I could only get like a little bit of movement each time. I had to take it off. I had to take the socket off, rotate it, fit it back on, and I could only move the torque wrench about that far. So that was no fun at all. Thank God they're all done. I did the sequence, torquing sequence, back and forth like a star pattern, all this back and forth right here, so that the head is slowly torqued to spec from the middle outwards. So these are on. Next are the headers. So I have the hardware right there. Cleaned up all the bolts basically to put the gasket, the headers on. Right here is the gasket. It is multi-layer metal gasket. Pretty interesting. These things all get sandwiched together. Hopefully I won't have any exhaust leaks. There's these little bumped up ridges here that are going to get compressed and create hopefully a really nice seal. So those are going on next. After that, I'm going to finish torquing the rocker stands down, and I'm going to set valve lash. That'll be the next video. What I ended up going with was the ATI fluid damper and their balancer, or the pulley actually. I was going to use the underdrive pulley that's right there, but I ran into spacing problems. It's too far. It would actually, so basically the reason the spacing is different than a stock damper is that, or balancer, is that this is a different width than a factory one. That's why they supply their own pulley. So I'm just gonna, instead of making a one-off pulley, I could get one, but then reading into it, it actually slows down the power steering and the air compressor, the AC compressor right there, so much that under 3,000 RPM, and the alternator, which would go right here. I won't be charging the battery basically under 3,000 RPM, and my air conditioning would kind of be non-existent, which would really suck in traffic. And also slowing down the power steering pump so much that actually supplies the hydraulic cooling fan for the radiator, I might overheat in traffic. So there's about 4 negatives to swapping to a smaller pulley for a streetcar somewhat. So I'm just gonna do without. And I mean, it's a great pulley. I'm not sad or mad about the pulley that I'm using. It's just that, you know, we're trying to squeeze out every ounce of horsepower, and there's one spot where I could gain maybe 10 horsepower, but it's just 10 horsepower. Not gonna let it bother me anymore. I'll probably have better driving streetcar without that. The next thing after that is these. I made these oil cooler lines. Here's the oil cooler. In this car, the oil is cooled with antifreeze. So there's a heat exchanger right here. Here's the supply line. Here's the return line back to the block and then down into the oil pan. So I'm waiting on a 45 degree down here to make this actually a better fit. I have a 90. It's really hard to see down there. You can't really see it. It's right there. That's a 90 degree, and the other one is a 45. The 45 is so much nicer on the one line. I'm actually waiting on another 45 for this one. I'm going to swap it out, and it's going to keep my lines right here away from this right here, because the factory line was hitting, actually it was hitting my belt tensioner, and I don't want that. So, and they also went above this bar from the factory. So I'm routing them underneath. There's just enough clearance in between the radiator line, or these coolant lines. It's actually going to be a nicer, basically a nicer fit by putting them all under this bar. And then I'll have the room right here for my catch can set up for my coming off my valve covers. So there's going to be the bar is going to go back here. It's like a frame, kind of like basically a connector between this frame rail and that frame rail. And my catch can is going to sit right here. And I want all this room, as much room as possible here. So this is going to be a lot better setup. Just waiting on a 45 down there, and I'll be able, because basically the 90 degree is too short, and it comes off the power or this timing chain cover, and it hits everything. So the 90 degree is too short, and it would hit this radiator hose right there. And there's just really no good way to route it. It's just so tight in there that it's just hard to get the right angle. But that's where I'm at right now. It'll finally be going together soon. Exhaust is going on. Then I'll be moving on to the intake. After I set all the valve lash, I'll keep the valve covers off until I have everything back on the front end to crank it over and make sure that I'm getting oil flow up to the valve stem tips right here. Because I want to make sure I'll crank it over some after I put fluids in it, get the oil pumped through it before I try and start it. I'm just going to make sure before I put my valve covers on that there's actually oil coming off the rockers. So that'll be the next video. Finally.